Hey, what's up? And welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh King, and I'm stumbling through my words. Sam, how are you doing today?
Yeah, my name is Sam, and I'm about to stumble through an airport. As soon as I'm done recording this, I'm hopping on a plane.
Where are you going?
I'm going to where our guest lives. We have a guest on the show today, and I'm flying from Tampa to Birmingham because I'm speaking for the Tuscaloosa Baptist Association. So
Nice.
I know that this will post well after that speaking engagement, but
Yeah.
thank you to my kind host for being so hospitable to me. Even though I haven't done it yet, by the time everyone listens to this, I will have experienced the speaking engagement, and I'm only expecting the best from Tuscaloosa Baptists.
Right, exactly. So why don't you introduce our guest since you teased the idea?
Yeah, we have Rob Ball on the show. Welcome, Rob.
Well, good to be here. Good to be here.
So, Rob, and my dad jokes with you all the time, and I'm sure you grew up with this. I don't know why he does that with you. He says you have your name is basically two first names, and so he calls you Paul Rob. Then it confuses me because I know your name, and then he'll call you something different, and then I'm just like, oh my goodness. So Rob, connected to Church Answers, we've done some work together, and I can't wait to share this story because Rob's an experienced pastor. He could go really just about anywhere that he wants to go, do just about whatever he wants to do. He is at Huffman Baptist, and we have seen an incredible turnaround story there. So I can't wait to dive into Rob's story. So more on that in just a moment, but we do need to pay the bills, Josh, and thank our sponsor.
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, I would love for your dad to switch my names and start calling me King Josh all the time. I think that would be great. In fact, I would love for everybody to call me King Josh.
Yeah, I mean, that's better than Joe Wiki. do you remember when somebody on the internets got onto you about Joe Wiki, which is your handle, and how he thought you were some woke liberal or something like that because
somehow,
of it?
Somehow Wiki just set the guy off, and he just thought like I was trying to either be woke, which I don't understand woke, everything's woke, or like I was trying to be a know-it-all, like I was Wikipedia. And it was so funny when Sam walks in there.
You're the woke know-it-all, Josh King, or King Josh, exactly, or whatever you want to be called.
And it's just Joshua William King. It's just the first three, two initials.
Well, I had to step in. You weren't even going to correct him.
Oh yeah,
you didn't even correct him. I felt like it's his name.
Trolls. I don't feed trolls. I don't feed the trolls.
I know. Yeah. I mean. Talk about a moron. I'll just say it.
Oh,
what a moron.
Twitter trolls are the best.
Twitter is full of morons.
It really
All
is.
right. Which is a terrible segue into our sponsor because I'm sure the people at church teams are like, listen, we serve all people of all capacities. So we want to thank church teams. They've been sponsoring the show for quite some time, and they really do have an incredible church management software system. It's really for all churches, large or small. But man, they really, for those of you who are listening and you're like, man, I don't know about our, with our budget and can we do this? I mean, church teams really serves churches of limited budgets very, very well. You get text to church, which is a great way to communicate with your people because 90% of text messages are read within 3 minutes. But they could do membership, they could do email, online giving, scheduling for your volunteers, which is great. Process management, they can do giving too. So get value without compromise. Go to church teams, and the way that you can sign up is at est.church. And here's the thing. It's a free trial. They'll even give you a little mini consult if you fill out the form, and they'll, work with you, call you. And give you 2 months free, but it's only for our listeners. So you've got to go to est.church to get that offer. They've got plans starting at $37 a month for churches under 200 people, which is great because 92% of churches in the United States are 250 people and under. So this is the vast majority of churches.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, go get it. est.church. Go check out church teams.
That's one of the things I love about church teams is you look at the price, you think, it's going to be like, lower quality. It's not. It's just as good as the other guys and just a really affordable price. I heard this last week that the average church, the median size church in Arkansas is 40
Is it really?
people. Yeah. To be in the
Wow.
top
In the
10%
United
of Baptist. Go ahead.
As in the United States, it's 65 people.
To be in the top 10% of Baptist churches in Arkansas is 200 or more. So kind of a smaller, what most people consider to be a smaller demographic. I know you have to say normative size or the woke police will hit you. And so I have to say normative, AKA small. So let's go into a conversation now about a church that refused to die. I feel like there should be some bed music come up.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of spooky, right? But not really, because Rob's really done a good job leading Huffman Baptist. And so, Rob, all right, tell us, where was Huffman when you got there? And when we say an example of a church that refused to die, I mean, what was killing the church?
So really just a sense of not knowing what to do. They had a willingness to reach the neighborhood around them, but they did not know how to do that. The last pastor that was here did a good job, but when he left, all of the young families left as well. And so Huffman, 50 years ago, Huffman was like the third largest Southern Baptist church in Birmingham, one of the largest in the state. And we had the buildings to prove that. So when I got here, if everybody showed up on the same Sunday, we probably would have had 175 people. So averaging about 125 on Sunday morning. I was 57 when I came, and I brought the average age of the church down when we joined. 2 weeks later, though, we had a senior adult lady join, so it went back up again. So we really were in a position of 90% of our buildings. We were only using about 25% of our buildings at the time. We had two complete buildings that were totally shut down. We would cycle the air conditioning and heating and cooling system on and off from time. Our custodial staff would go through and flush toilets, run water every once in a while. But other than that, the buildings were not used. And so that was where we were. Thankfully, the church had done a good job of saving money. We had about $800,000 in reserves. So we knew that we at least had some time and some resources to be able to do some things and think outside the box.
Now, I want to stop you right there, because for a lot of our listeners to think of like, wow, $800,000 cash in the bank, you would think like, man, you could do whatever you want. Well, if you had a smaller campus, you could.
Yes.
Rob's campus is quite substantial. So for a normative, is that what you said, Josh? A normative sized church, that may be like having $80,000 or $8,000 in the bank. So it sounds like a lot of money, but this is what we see at Church Answers a lot, is just deferred maintenance and how it can eat up a church. So you were in a death spiral because, well, you had good people and no scandal or anything like that, but you've got too few people and too much campus.
Yes.
And what did you do to overcome that problem?
My first 6 months, I did nothing but listen to our people and talk to God. I mean, that's all we did. I listened to our people and I tried to talk to God. And I remember walking the campus during that time as I was thinking about, okay, what's the vision going to be? How will we move the church from where we are to where we need to be? And I just prayed, Lord, you gave this church this facility as an asset, as a blessing, but it's now an albatross and it is a liability. How can we leverage this facility for the sake of the gospel going forward? And so in January of 2020, announced vision. And part of that vision was that we would partner with 5 nonprofits that were doing ministry in Northeast Birmingham, and that we would be open to bringing those nonprofits onto our campus so that we would have more access into the community. We would be using the buildings. And so we brought in our first ministry partner in the summer of 2021, because 3 months after we announced vision, COVID hit, everything shut down, and there was that. So we brought in our first ministry partner in June of 21. It's an organization that was doing Christian-based character ed and leadership development in the public schools. And they wanted space off campus where they could bring students after hours and say, okay, the principles that we're teaching you in the classroom, let's talk about where that comes from, and should be able to share the gospel, to be able to make disciples. That partnership has grown to now we have an African-American church plant on our campus that will launch out from here sometime later this year. We have 2 nonprofits that are doing work in the schools. And then as a result of that, we brought in an entire private Christian high school this time last year. And so we have gone from, on a good Sunday, having 125 people in our worship service. This was prior to COVID. To now, in the course of any given week, there are almost 400 people who will be on our campus at some point during the course of a week. And that's typically 6 to 7 days a week now.
Wow. I think that this is a good point to make right here about if you're listening and maybe you're at a church that is fine, it's doing okay. You've got some good days. Listen, like Sam mentioned there, deferred maintenance is one of the biggest things that will just kill off a church. So don't defer the maintenance. Make plans to fix that. The other thing is, if you are at a growing church, I know you're tempted to go off and build this huge, 1,000-seat sanctuary or just whatever you consider to be huge. Hey, how about we not? How about we use a smaller flat floor, chairs that can be used multiple times, preach 3-4 times, get a teaching team, launch out another church. The country is littered with 1,000+ sanctuaries with 100 people trying to keep the things afloat. You're talking, it's just so much money. So there are so many better ways to use those things. And then the last thing I would say is, I did the same thing in Texas, where huge building was not filling it. We went out and partnered with 3 church plants, brought them in, and the campus is alive. And all 4 churches benefited from more people being on campus, more people contributing, more people helping. And so it really helps. So if you've got one of these older buildings and you're like, we can't keep the thing alive, well, then don't do it by yourself. Bring in as many partners as you can across the spectrum, and really use that thing as much as you can. Look, if it's deferred maintenance and if it's dying, it's going to the ground, use up every inch of it until it does, or you can flip it. And so I love that story there and those aspects and what we can learn from them.
Yeah, the thing that I picked up on is church revitalization may expand beyond your own people, and probably should expand beyond your own people. So Rob's got these nonprofits. He's got a school.
Church plant.
And Rob, tell us how you connected ministry to, say, the school that's there.
So our philosophy going in was, we're not in the real estate business, and we weren't just looking to offset cost or use up space. We bring in partners that we can do ministry alongside of. And so with the school, for instance, we've already baptized 5 students this year, and we will baptize 5 more in the next few weeks before school gets out for the summer. So all of our Sunday school classes have adopted one of the grades. This is a 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade school. We have adopted, each of our classes have adopted one grade level, and they pray for those kids. They give them birthday cards. They give them gifts at, Christmas and different times of year. They give them Easter baskets at Easter, and you would think high school kids wouldn't want that. They love it. They absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And so we also have brought on a family pastor whose job is to try to cultivate the relationships with students. So we preach in chapel once a week. We rotate 3 of our staff members. I'll do 1 week. Our executive pastor does a week. Our family pastor does a week. And then we're also discipling kids on Friday mornings. We have access to the kids there. So the neat thing with this, we have reached one family already from the school, a senior. She actually sings on our praise team now. We have one of our church families who now has their daughter enrolled at the school. So we have those connections. But the neat thing is that because we're doing cross-cultural ministry, we now have young families. This time last year, we had 0 young families with children, none. We now have this. On most Sundays, there'll be 30 in attendance under the age of 40. And these are people that are coming from all over the metro area because they say, this is a church that gets it. This is a church that is trying to cross-cultural, that wants to look like the neighborhood, and they want to be a part of that.
Yeah. I love that.
So I love how you opened up your facility to others, but then you connected ministry within the church to the people to whom you open the facility to. And I think that's a really important thing, because what you said about not being in the real estate business is important. I understand some churches may have the kind of facility where leasing out space is financially beneficial. Let's say you're in a downtown urban area and that price per square foot is just astronomical. There may be a time and a place to do that. I will say, though, that if you are making a quote unquote profit or surplus from your rental income, the IRS does require you, if it's a for-profit entity, to report that income. So please be careful if you do that. That is a for-profit enterprise. Technically, nonprofits are allowed to enter into that for-profit enterprise, but you have to pay income tax on it. And I am a little concerned about some areas perhaps wanting to charge property tax as well. But that's for a future date, a future concern. I don't know of any cases out there. You guys can correct me if you're listening, if some local communities have done that. But what Rob has done is he's partnered with nonprofit entities. And that's something that I would encourage you to look at if you have a facility where you can accommodate that. We've done the same thing. We brought a school into our church, and we partner with a local Christian school to bring in their preschool on our campus. It's been a wonderful partnership. I wouldn't change it. I would do it again 100 times. Rob, I know you feel the same way about this high school. So talk about the switch. I want to change gears a little bit. Talk about the switch from, to being more multi-ethnic and intentionally multi-ethnic. I mean, you're in Birmingham, Alabama, which has a history of racial issues. How did the people receive that? Both those who were white and then those who were coming who were black? Like, were there any tensions? How did that work?
So, as I understand it, going even back 30 years ago, Huffman has had African-American members in the past. So when I got here, we probably had, I don't know, maybe 15%, maybe a little less than 15% of our membership that was African-American. A pastor going back 15 years ago now was very intentional as the neighborhood started to shift. It's still a middle-class neighborhood. The people just don't look like the three of us on this podcast. But the pastor who was here then did a really good job of trying to position the church to reach the community. After he left, the next two pastors led the church to have the conversation of, do we leave the neighborhood or do we stay? There, especially in this part of town, there had been several churches that had moved out into the suburbs. And so the church went through that, and every time they did, there was another wave of people who left. So the church has been open to African Americans, but they did nothing intentionally to make the church attractive to especially young African Americans. So the biggest thing that we did was we went into the neighborhood. And, we do the pray and go from Church Answers. I'll give you a little plug there, Sam. We do the pray and go in the neighborhood and leave the door hangers. We transitioned our worship. So my thing is that everybody in the room should at some point during the worship service feel like they were able to sing to the Lord in their heart language, something that really connects with them, which is really hard to do when you've got African Americans, we've got a few Hispanics, we have a lot of old people, and you would think, okay, how are you going to do a not only cross-cultural worship service but also multi-generational worship service. And so our worship team just does a fabulous job of putting together a worship experience that is going to have some contemporary Black gospel in it. It's going to have some contemporary things that I would listen to routinely on the radio. We're going to do some hymns, and it's just worked. And as people come, they're like, wow, we had no idea that this was going on, and they stay.
I would say, circling back to the facilities usage thing, Sam, that we've actually done an episode on doing your facilities usage. You could look back on those. I'd have to try to find the number, but setting up accounts where the ministry partners can contribute to a fund that is just used for upkeep. And so the church is not making a profit. It's not for profit sort of entity. I do love what you're talking about there of including multi-generational, also multi-ethnic into the worship services. That's going, and then going into the communities. Too often churches that are dying, one of the key components to dying churches is they've turned inward. They're just worried about themselves. They haven't even walked out. Sometimes there's nobody even living in the community that is around them. And so they're having a really hard time reaching their neighbors and those sorts of things. You've got to be intentional about that, or it's not going to change.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, this is a whole nother topic when it comes to white flight, what happened with churches who moved out of neighborhoods because of an influx of Black people. Goodness, we could do a series of episodes on that. And there were a lot of things in the church growth movement that prompted those moves. And in my view, I'll just share my opinion, they were way more detrimental to the church than helpful. It looked good at the start because a lot of these churches grew in the suburbs, and hey, that's great. And those suburbs needed churches too. But perhaps the motive for being out there wasn't the greatest motive. What Huffman did was they stayed, and they were unlike other churches. Mm-hmm. It's unusual, and I applaud the leaders who made that decision. I'm sure there was a lot of back and forth. I'm sure there was a lot of heartache, and I'm sure there was a lot of people who thought a lot of different things as to what the church should do. But when I see a church like Huffman stay, and not only stay, commit to the neighborhood, this is where true revitalization will begin. And not just revitalization in the church itself, but also the community. Because a revitalized church in a neighborhood will help revitalize the neighborhood too. Whoever lives there, white, Black, Hispanic, doesn't matter. And you have made that very intentional decision to say, we're here. We have this giant campus. It's a bit of an albatross, but we're here. So let's reach the people around us. And unfortunately, 30, 40 years ago, a lot of churches did not make that commitment. And there are a lot of neighborhoods that are hurting because of it. So I just want to say, not only to Rob, who is committed now, but to the people who said, let's welcome African Americans into our church. Let's reach our neighborhood. And those decisions, that culture was, started, 30, 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an amazing testimony to the story of this church. And yet another reason why churches like Huffman, it's like we can't let those churches die. We can't. So, maybe you're listening and you're a part of one of those churches, and maybe you've got a bit of an uphill climb, and maybe it's more than facilities. Maybe it's culture or a lack of evangelism or an unwillingness to reach the neighborhood. And you're kind of wondering, man, should I be doing this? Yeah. Let God tell you your calling, but we need people at these churches, and we need these churches to thrive. And I'm really grateful that we can tell the story of Huffman Baptist, because I think it's an important one. And I hope it inspires our listeners to do similar things that you've done, Rob.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will just say, and Sam, I know you have a consulting practice as well, but I'd be happy to walk alongside any church that any pastor that's wanting to think about how do we do this. I was doing church revitalization consulting before coming to Huffman, and all I've tried to do is say, okay, the things that I've been telling other people how to do, let me put it into practice here at Huffman. And it's innovative. I tell people we don't just think outside the box. We crush the box and put it in the dumpster and set the dumpster on fire. But it's fun. I'm having more fun right now than I've had in 36 years of ministry.
Well, that's great. Well, how can people contact you? Because I know there's got to be people who are listening to this who are inspired and like, I want that to happen to my church. What can they do to contact you?
So I have a website. You can get to it two different ways. One is robpaul, PAUL.net. And you can also go to churchrevitalizationresources.com.
Okay. robpaul.net. That's the one I'll say, because that's pretty easy to remember. Just don't mix the names up. I don't know where paulrob.net would take you. Maybe you should get that one too, because my dad keeps confusing. Well, robpaul.net is where you can contact Rob. Well, Rob, thank you for, I know there's way more to your story than what you just shared, and there's no way that one episode could do justice to your ministry or what's happened at Huffman, but we wanted to just ask you to be on the show just to, really inspire other churches and other leaders out there to say, hey, it can be done. And you've still got a long way to go. It's not like you've arrived yet. Let's just be clear about that. I mean, we're kind of telling your story halfway through it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Probably a quarter of the way through it.
Okay, a quarter of the way through
and look,
it.
I am perfectly capable of doing something stupid today that blows the whole thing up. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
all of us. That's all of us.
Right.
But you told me something in a previous conversation that I also want to share. I hope you don't mind me saying this. But your leaders recently came to you and said, "Rob, we need you to stay. Like we want you here for the next," and I forget how many years, but it's several years. So there are people within your church that have recognized what is happening, and they are getting ahead of things and saying, please stay. And I think that's a testimony to your leadership and to what they're seeing happening in their church. And I hope that for all of our listeners that is what happens in their churches. If you're pastoring or leading a church, that the other leaders in the church are seeing the value of what you're adding and saying, hey, we want you to stay. Unfortunately, too many churches, the story is, well, you changed some things, you got to go. And so kudos to your leaders for stepping up and saying, no, we recognize that these things are good. Hard. I like to tell my church, it's harder, but it's healthier. Yes. Multi-ethnic and multilingual ministry. Oh my goodness. We have 3 languages at my church now: Mandarin, Spanish, and English. And that makes meetings very, very difficult. But it's harder, but it's healthier. And being in Birmingham, being a church that's Black, Hispanic, and white, it's beautiful, but it's difficult. And we just need more people to do it. So thanks, Rob, for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
We also, once again, want to thank church teams. Thank you for sponsoring the show. You can get a free trial to church teams at est.church. Also want to thank Church Answers for sponsoring us. We have a bookstore, so would love for you to go check us out at churchanswers.com. We've been delivering digital products to you for years. We can now deliver physical products to your door. So you can go to churchanswers.com, click on the little bookstore button. It will take you into a system that's backed by Christian Book, which is awesome. And they can set you up with everything that you need. We've got some curated content there. And oh, by the way, if you buy from Church Answers and our bookstore, a portion of the proceeds goes to help African pastors who are getting certified. We have a certification program that we do. And when you buy stuff at the Church Answers bookstore, you help us certify African pastors who would otherwise not be able to get certified in their communities, which is a very important thing in certain African countries. So thankful to Church Answers for doing that. Thank you, Church Answers, for sponsoring the show. Once again, thank you, Rob. And Josh, you're going to do your thing now.
Yes, thank you so much, Rob and Sam, and thank you for listening to EST. Make sure that you let your friends know in some creative way. Why don't you go ahead and just text a few of your church leader friends and let them know about EST so that we can help grow the show and provide more resources, conversations, and discussions that are helping establish church leaders. We'll catch you next week.